So I'm going to go ahead and get this rolling. And Lucky, to start the episode, I want to tell you what I wrote down as the prospective title of this as.
Okay. Are you already recording?
Yes, it is now rolling. Though I want to make sure... I think my levels are a little low. I want to bump me up because my microphone's slightly farther away from my face. But I made sure my pop filter is securely in there. So, let's hope for that. But what I decided to title this episode is Cyberpunks, Joystick, Jocks, and Phone Phreaks. But hey, before we get started...
I see how that works.
I want to remind everybody that this episode is brought to you by our patrons like Ahaigo Comics and Drago66. If you like what we do and want to see us do more, consider supporting us on Patreon. Yeah. We're here. We're doing What's Up. In case you can't tell, we're probably going to talk about Cyberpunk a lot. We could literally commentate over the... whatever it was, the 45 minutes of gameplay they did, but that would require work.
Nah, can I just talk about how fucking sweet and how hype I am for this shit, though?
No, you can. It's great. I mean, like, obviously, when you have a new thing that looks cool, there's always that little bit of, like, oh, is it getting overhyped? I mean, yes but no. Like, to me, I'm like, I don't think they're overpromising anything. I see the gameplay's what I want. There's shooting stuff, there's buying cyborg parts, there seems like there's a lot of atmosphere. Some people are concerned about, like, the driving of it. I don't know, maybe I would be more if I was familiar with some of CD Projekt Red stuff, but I never played any of The Witcher, so like, Okay, I don't care about mobility. You own cars, you can apparently own and drive a variety of vehicles, that's cool.
Like their best major project, like, I don't know if it was the last major project, but they did Witcher 3, which was like, everyone was all like, oh my god, it's the best goddamn game. Yep. Which I haven't played, but that's what I hear.
No, so, people are positively disposed to CD Projekt Red. Also, they're famous for doing a lot of, like, no microtransactions. A lot of their DLC schedule is very well priced, and you get a lot of your value out for it. They fund lots of, like, reasonable distributors and stuff for games, so they're seen as a very good and healthy company, and I think they are, based on what I've heard. But like I said, the trailer, I mean, okay, is it going to be one for one? Probably not, because from what I understand, this is like an introductory level quest, but they explicitly say later, like during the Maelstrom Gang bit, that they are finding rare weapons with different kinds of upgrades and stuff, and added a couple cybernetics just randomly to spice it up. That's okay, because unless it's an actual downloadable demo, if the gameplay in a trailer is exactly like what's in the game, I think that's too much of a... It's like when a movie trailer gives too much of the movie away. You're killing some of the future experience.
Yeah, you want every experience... You want your own experience. You don't want the trailer's experience.
And honestly, that's what it looks like it's going to do, because there are quite a lot of options you could have taken in this quest. Do I think every quest is going to be that in-depth? Well, not unless they've only got like 5, but that's just a practical thing. I know they've been working on this a while.
They say it's a gameplay trailer, but you got to remember, like, sometimes like gameplay trailers, even if they're done in engine, are done with a certain cinematic flair. And
they like it's a vertical slice. They prepped it, but it is live gameplay. I'm pretty sure, because they people who saw behind closed doors demos, which was basically the same gameplay trailer they released, had somebody verify that it was quote-unquote live, right? Like, they had, like, say, hey, can you look at that? Or do something specific, right? Like, they were shown in the demonstration. So, it's live gameplay. It's just probably super polished and well-practiced, and that's pretty normal. Yeah. And I think it looks good. It's a game I want to play.
If I remember correct, didn't they, for 2077, this game has been on the line for years. I remember seeing the first trailer for it, like, what was it, like 4 or 5 years ago?
Yeah, something like that. It's been hanging around a while.
Yeah, I know. It's only, like, really gotten a resurgence since last year.
Yeah, they mysteriously reactivated their Twitter.
Yeah. Because originally, the original teaser trailer was literally just this hard-ass techno-punk going on with a woman, like, full-on cybered up with, like, blades, like, literally, like, bouncing bullets off her eyes. And that's all you had. That's all we had for, like, 3 or 4 years. And then finally, they're, like, been they've been picking it up, and we might be getting a release date like next year or two, I think.
Yeah, I think they've said that it's going to be the next year, right? Like, they're saying that it's close. They almost... I mean, obviously, stuff gets delayed, but I think that they're doing a fair job of, like, trying to hold in their quote-unquote hype.
Yeah.
Like,
they're
doing
still hyped for it, because...
Bethesda's got a good
Cyberpunk
model, I think. Like, you
had...
can say what you want about Bethesda games, but especially recently, their model of... Yeah, we're working on a game. It's gonna come out in like 3 months. Here's your fucking trailer with some gameplay. It's not gonna be perfect, but it's Bethesda, so here you fucking go. Like, and it's working for them. Bethesda has really been killing it since they dropped the Fallout. I mean, like, I don't think either of us have still played Fallout 4, right? Like, we still haven't done that.
No, I'm not. I was like, I'm sorry, I like post-apocalyptic games, but Fallout does not scratch that particular itch for me. It really doesn't.
Fallout is a very particular genre. And I'll say this. I'm sad that they're not looking to do, like, outside developers. I can, like, it's petty, but I can understand why Bethesda's not interested in, like, Fallout New Vegas 2 or Fallout New Vegas Remastered. It hurts me a lot because I fucking love it, but it's not their baby. That was somebody else working on their project. Do I think they did way fucking better than Bethesda did? Yeah. No, I fucking love New Vegas. Like... Like, compared to Fallout 3, Vegas is a lot... We've talked about this before, because when we started What's Up, I was replaying New Vegas. New Vegas, honestly, hits harder in a lot of ideas that you think are post-apocalyptic, right? Like, there's a concern of, like, gray morality, like, these different groups affecting cultures of the pre-bomb era coming together. There's, like, the weird science-y stuff in some of it. You know, Fallout was technically in the future before it got bombed, but it was a retro future kind of thing, right? Like,
yeah.
They do a lot of decent work to hit a lot of themes and build an interesting game in your usual Bethesda as engine, so there's bugs and stuff, but I think it flows pretty good. Fallout 3 we talked about this when we talked about morality even, Fallout 3 had a lot of ham-fisted video game morality in it with the karma system that was meaningless, a lot of, like, big mustache twirly like, yes, for lots of money, I will blow up Megaton for no fucking reason. Because you'll tell me where my dad is, I guess. And, yeah, stuff like that. So it's... I like the aesthetics of Fallout. What I heard about Fallout 4 is that it was a lot of the same shit, right? Like, it's a lot of the... there's very obvious routes you should take. You know, there's a lot of, like... Oh, well, there's only 4 boxes for the ending, and they're all the same, just who you like better. And stuff like that. So I don't really... I mean, I haven't played it. I already know what the twist is. I got it, because you can just tell from the way the game is set up.
I don't know but I can make some healthy guesses and probably not be far off.
Yeah,
so.
No, it's pretty easy to guess at the big twist. And so on. So, yeah, no, I just like, I mean, like, I know they got a Game of the Year with all their DLC. Maybe someday I'll pick it up.
Yeah, that's how I'm feeling. I'm trying to think of, like, a post-apocalyptic game that, like, actually, like, I really enjoy playing. Well, I guess technically Horizon Zero Dawn is that, but that's, like, super post-apocalyptic. That's, like, tribalism, where you've gone so far that it's, like, not even... post-apoc, it's like new world with just old technology laying around. But that's still amazing fucking game.
Horizon yet, but I will someday. It looks really good. It's a good PlayStation exclusive. I just earlier today lamented. I was like, God, I miss Killzone. So I'd love to see what those guys did because I've heard nothing but good things about Horizon.
Yeah, the only reason that Horizon Zero Dawn didn't do better is that it was in the same release window as Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild.
Yeah, there was a lot of exclusive competition there. Yeah,
which also can be considered a post-apocalyptic game. And see, this is the example I'm going to use. Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild is a better post-apocalyptic game because it basically said, okay, here's a tutorial land. We can't let you leave until you know the fucking basics. All right, now you know the basics. Go do whatever the fuck you want.
You can literally do anything. But if you don't prep, you'll get your ass kicked. Yeah. It's like it's a game that immediately after leaving the original plateau, you can immediately go fight Ganon, right?
Yeah.
He's just gonna beat your ass.
It's like, it's a game that says that says, here, you can go do this, or you can take your time and learn how to survive. It's like, I think that's one of the things that post-apocalyptic games need to do, is you have to encourage survival skills. Fallout doesn't do that. Fallout for me just says, here, just shoot these things in a gray atmosphere a lot. It's like, I don't get that survival, like, things. Like, that's why I like New Vegas, because they had the survival mode where you had had to worry about water, and like food was really good, and like
even
that.
if you don't play that way, because the survival mode is a little more hardcore.
Yeah.
In fact, I think it is called like a hardcore survival mode. It's a little more intense than the regular game. It can be more constraining, but even then, the ideas that went into that side of the game were still there, right? Like, you could still make your own food and stuff, and the way the economy in New Vegas was set up a lot was, yeah, you know what? Making fucking new bottles of water or cactus water out of fucking cactus fruits and empty bottles, and crafting your own like trail mix and caravan lunches out of stuff that was left behind was way more efficient than trying to buy fucking stim packs, because merchants only had like 2, and guess what? If you're not spec'd in barter, they're fucking expensive.
Yeah, they are.
So it was a very
solid
dynamic. I hope that 76 will be a little bit more like that. With you're thrown out into the world kind of thing to build your own landscape and stuff. I'll be very interested to see how the complete ins and out of that work.
Yeah, because if I'm like, Cyberpunk 2077 is based off an really old tabletop RPG.
Yeah, Cyberpunk 2020, one of the classics. Yeah. Let me guess.
I never played the original, but I played one of its spiritual successors, Shadowrun. I played a fuck ton of Shadowrun. So, like, I'm, like, in this setting, I'm super used to, like, building my own path, going my own way, and I really want 2077 to capture that same feeling. They look like they're trying to do that by, like, with, like, in their character customization, but I'm wondering how they're going to do it in their story.
Yeah,
like,
that we'll have to see, because they've only shown us, like, one story node, basically, right? Like, well, 2, kind of. They kind of play into each other. Basically, you do a major story quest, you get paid for that story quest, V immediately goes on, like, a 3-day bender, which I love as a storytelling mechanism. Yeah, so here's how we disguise the fact that we have to basically stop down the game and turn on all those flags you just activated in the story, because you did a thing. And let the world develop, and just like, you were just drinking and fucking for a couple days, living up that cyberpunk lifestyle. I love that. That's great.
I am super glad they said this is a mature game. I'm like, yes, do not. That's one of the
the trailer itself doesn't hide. There's, dead naked titties immediately.
It's like, it does not. Like, look away from, like, drugs, sex, and violence. Because, I'm sorry, if you do not have drugs, sex, and violence in a Cyberpunk game, this ain't a Cyberpunk game. It's really not.
That's... Well, yeah. At some point we may want... Because I want to talk a little bit about just our thoughts on the genre in general. So at some point we might want to try and clarify what the fuck Cyberpunk is supposed to be. But, by the way, the original edition of Cyberpunk was Cyberpunk 2013. Which was first published in 1988. 2 years later, though, it was rebranded as the second edition, Cyberpunk 2020, in good old 1990. And then Shadowrun was first published in 1989.
Yep.
And if you don't know about Shadowrun, it's basically like... You can think of it as similar to the concept of Cyberpunk. They were both percolating at the same time, the late 80s. And I do think that some of the Cyberpunk elements are definitely inspired by the earlier Cyberpunk tabletop game, because, like, you do your decking. How much of that, I mean, with that closer development time, how much of that is just genre stuff I can't be sure of? Like, somebody's probably done some in-depth research in there. But, yeah, no, so Shadowrun is basically, what if we took an almost D&D-esque high fantasy, but we made it a Cyberpunk instead?
Yeah,
and so it's
like Shadowrun, like it's Cyberpunk, but you have trolls, elves, orcs, dwarves. You have magic. You can summon stuff, but you also have really cool guns and cybernetic enhancements, and you know what, and all this crazy stuff. And one of the things I love most about it is that it has like a settings for like all the round, but the base setting is settled in Seattle, Washington, which, as I said, I have to tell people, like, I only live like a half hour away, so it's always great for building campaigns just to actually go down to Seattle and be like, I wonder what this would look like in like 50 years if magic and shit happened.
I think it's also kind of interesting that the default is Seattle. I wonder what prompted that, because it was originally published by FASA Corporation Games, who were they're responsible for early like Star Trek and Doctor Who role-playing games. They're responsible for Crimson Skies. You guys probably may have heard of them from BattleTech. The big American mecha game. But they're based in Chicago. So I wonder why they decided that...
The reason why I say it, I think it's Seattle, is because, honestly, like, Seattle, like, the Pacific Northwest has this really weird supernatural flavor to it. Like, we're in this really weird place. Like, there's a lot of spirituality over here. We have a lot of Native American customs around here. You know, Sasquatch, just like this, it's like, what was a few other things? I don't know, but Seattle is definitely not afraid of being spooky and weird. And so, like, one of our main attractions in our in Seattle is like this giant library of supernatural books and stuff. And it's like, so I can understand why. I think it's just easier to. I think it's just an easier flavor. It's like if you're gonna do like creepy ass magic, you go down like to New Orleans or something, you know.
Which I bet there is a Shadowrun somewhere down there.
Oh yeah. Well, it's a Shadowrun isn't exclusively based in Seattle.
No, it's just that's the default in every book. That. And in Cyberpunk, the default is Night City, which is a fictional city, which is named after a dude. So if you're one of those assholes complaining about, what's all this fucking daylight in my Cyberpunk? The city is not named after the concept of night. It's named after a guy, and it's set in California, which is also probably why it's got... I mean, it's got a lot of the retro 80s look because that's Cyberpunk. Let me see if I can find... What's the, like, original Cyberpunk thing? Like, what do we call the first Cyberpunk? It's rooted in the new wave science fiction of the 60s and 70s, yeah, so... and most people recognize a lot of the writers, Harlan Ellison, Philip K. Dick. Alright, so, I think the novel that locked in the cyberpunk concept is William Gibson's original Neuromancer, which was published in 1984. Which was 2 years after the movie Blade Runner came out.
Yeah, which, that was the...
Yeah, 1982, which was based on a Philip K. Dick story.
Yeah. Blade Runner is what got Cyberpunk onto my radar, I'd say.
Which is fair. But yeah, so for me, well, I've said, first of all, one of my favorite anime of all time is Ghost in the Shell Standalone Complex. So that's really where I started. I don't think I obviously, being born in 1992, I missed a lot of 80s movies, and for a while, technology didn't really catch up to take me back. I'm also, like, the youngest in my siblings, and so, like, there wasn't really any pressure to, like, go back and show me any culture or anything. My parents are a little bit older, so I missed out on some stuff like Blade Runner, like Alien and Aliens, lots of some of the classic sci-fi like that. Like, I didn't go back until I was in my like late teens, and I was like, oh, I know how to use the library search system to get DVDs and stuff like that, and also witchcraft. But anyway, witchcraft. So to me, Standalone Complex on Adult Swim, that was like some of my first big exposure to a lot of that stuff, and I just ate it up.
You see, like, here's the thing, like anime titles like Standalone Complex and Psychopaths, I don't know if I can necessarily call them cyberpunk.
Well, yeah. So if you
It's
think about it
more-
hard enough,
more-
Ghost in the Shell is technically what a lot of people call post-cyberpunk.
Yeah.
You can argue that Psychopaths is similar, though I think that's a slightly more gray area. And honestly,
'Cause,
Psychopaths isn't cyberized enough. It's sure, like the crime thing is on a network, so sometimes like network connectivity hurts them, but nobody's cyberized. Nobody's doing really computer crimes or anything. It's not in either like a rebellious subculture or even hacker subculture. So Psychopaths is probably not cyberpunk in any form. It just has an aesthetic we associate with cyberpunk. It's just a classic speculative fiction story, which is something I think we've lost a little bit in our modern era, is the ability to just say, oh, that's just a general form of like speculative science fiction, right? Like, hey, we propose a world that has a quality of X and we just go from there. That's how a lot of classic sci-fi is written. A lot of Heinlein is like that, stuff like that.
Yeah, but as I said, like, we try to categorize everything, and everyone's like, oh, what's that future setting that everyone talks about? Oh, cyberpunk. Let's just shove it in there.
So Ghost in the Shell is technically post-cyberpunk because the supposed heroes, who are generally positively disposed, they're trying to protect society and civilians, are a government agency who works against government corruption, against corporations, against anti-governmental terrorism. Your traditional cyberpunk heroes are mercenaries, anti-government terrorists, and corporate freelancers with hearts of gold.
Yeah, they're rebels, man. They're like they're down on the streets.
That's where the punk part of cyberpunk comes from. You're not like, we've turned punk into like a weird genre suffix, which is something else we could talk about.
Punk, steampunk.
Very few punk genres are actually punk. Steampunk can be punk. Mostly it's just a fashion statement, though, which is why normally we say 90% of everything is crap. 99% of steampunk is crap because it doesn't even know what the fuck genre it is. It's literally a type of Victorian fiction with like a little fluff on it.
I do like the Steam Victoria fashion. I think it's cool, but it's like, it's not punk.
Fashion is not a fictional genre. Like, fashion can have its own genre, I guess, because that's how the word genre works, but still, like, it's different. Cyberpunk is a real punk. If we accept that cyberpunk is a thing, I accept that biopunk is a real thing, because that's basically just the idea of, instead of computerized technology and, like, robotics becoming our dominant tech that affects the world, it's genetic engineering and stuff like that. That's fine.
That's why I like Shadowrun, because that's in there. Like, there's biomods, too. It's like, you want a fucking prehensile tail? Let's just slap that baby on in there.
And for certain purposes, I accept that, what some people call, like, dungeon punk is a thing. Because, you can totally build, like, a systemic world based on classic, like, tabletop, high fantasy magic and stuff, and totally call into question the social order there. That is definitely a theme you can do. I don't know how many real, like, dungeon punk stories there are, but that's totally a thing you can do.
Dungeon punk, we can talk about steampunk, cyberpunk, biopunk.
Diesel punk might be a thing, right? Like the weird concept of like everything that's gas based and like not
I put that into like I kind of figured that into Wastelander. Like,
and honestly, hold on, we should probably because
like Mad Max. I don't know, Mad Max is definitely
Mad Max is a post-apocalyptic idea.
Yeah,
the go juice is important, but that doesn't make it punk because there's no establishment.
Well, I don't know. It's like,
I mean, it depends on what you're doing. Like, hold on, let me. Some people I think deride TV tropes because it is a little, in the pop cultural sense, it is a little autistic. It's very much what we're talking about, right? Like coming up with a classification and a word for everything.
Yeah.
That said, so long as you understand that the whole point of shared language is to build a system you can communicate about and use it correctly, it's fine. Like, the idea is to come up with a shared terminology that people can use to understand what a trope is. Because guess what? Describing some tropes without using trope names is hard. Like, what do you call a heel face turn, right? Like, I don't know, the bad guy redeemed himself. That doesn't flow as well and isn't as pithy as using the wrestling term, which was established before TV tropes. That's where that comes from, by the way. Yeah. A heel is a bad, quote-unquote, wrestler, and a face is a good wrestler. It comes from babyface. So let's see. Yeah.
But what I was saying about Mad Max is, like, yeah, there's no establishment, but, like, Mad Max is complete and utter anarchy at all times. Which, anarchy can still be a very solid punk theme.
It can, but the question is, like, what's your punkishness? So let me roll down some of the lists that TV Tropes has here, which they apparently have linked to official trope types. Huh. Stone punk, which is what they call the bamboo technology-based punk. Basically, imagine the Flintstones genre, like where everything is weirdly so Stone Age. Like that can be punk, but it seems a little weird. That's one of those definitely like, okay, so it's a tech thing, right? You've got the stone right, but the punk part is questionable.
Yeah.
Sandal punk would be the Bronze and Iron Age, which you totally could do because that's like talking about like a lot of like weird classical inventors, ancient inventions, possibly even mythical inventors and stuff, and like, or like the weird ancient astronauts. Classic civilization. Classic civilization did in fact have social disruptions and social stratification. You can totally turn that into a punk genre.
Oh yeah.
Then we talked about dungeon punk, basically the classic medieval European fantasy, the magic is your technology now thing. Then we've got steampunk, which we've talked about. Like the pre-punk steampunk, basically, before we decided to add the punk in there, like H.G. Wells and Jules Verne. Again, what you would normally call like a classic speculative fiction. Those, I think, because God, if you read 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, that's got some real ahead of its time concepts.
Mm-hmm.
Not just with like submersible technology, and electricity, but just like actually understanding Captain Nemo is real interesting. And if you haven't read 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, pick it up sometime. It's in the public domain. Then they talk about I skipped one. They talk about clock punk, which is basically the Renaissance era.
Oh, is that the one that's like heavy on
heavily Da Vinci inspired stuff. Gunpowder Revolution,
cogs and gears.
I mean, some of that works. Like the TV Tropes explicitly calls out Assassin's Creed 2. So yeah, that could be a thing. I don't think that's a very solidly defined genre, though.
Yeah, again, like that'd be more like I would call that like Assassin's Creed 2. I would call Renaissance punk.
Right, but the using the clock in place of cyber to be firmly like, oh, our technology is based around like that. That could work. You could also, I think, call it maybe like gunpowder punk, because that's the era where gunpowder started to rise. That sort of thing. Like I said, there's steampunk. So diesel punk is basically like, honestly, it's like BioShock without necessarily adding the supernatural power stuff. Like the everything is fueled by electricity and combustion engines. If anybody's ever watched the movie Sky Captain and the World of Tomorrow, which is great, I loved it, but that's that kind of thing. Diesel punk is like the weird 1920s, 1940s, like just slap a fucking battery on it or a gas engine, and that's the real quote unquote diesel punk.
I call that industrial punk then.
Yeah, and honestly,
that'd be a better term for it.
Like, you could just call it Weird War, because that's literally what it is. It's like the 20s to the 40s. It's the industrial version of those wacky Nazis, right? Like, instead of Hitler doing occult stuff, it's Nazi super science and other nonsense.
It's the best in the world.
Then they talk about Ray Gun Gothic, aka Atom Punk.
What?
I don't think that's very punk at all.
What is
that's
that?
just
I've never heard of that.
You never heard of Ray Gun Gothic?
Ray Gun Gothic, no.
Are we
talking about?
That's
we talk about pulp science fiction.
Yes, that's called Ray Gun Gothic in some squares because of the art style.
Oh, okay. Okay, I know what that is. Never mind.
That could be punk-like if you wanted to call it Atom Punk, because, good lord, yes, this was the time where nuclear power solved everything or did everything. So that could definitely be a punk genre. And arguably, Fallout is what happens if you mix a Ray Gun Gothic or an Atom Punk setting with post-apocalypse, because everything is nuclear. So this is an interesting concept that TV Tropes calls on that I didn't even think about. What is sometimes called Formica Punk, but what they also call cassette futurism, which is basically analog technology cyberpunk, which could be an interesting speculative fiction. I would. This is probably a pretty rare genre because, like we said, it's very much a alternate future. Digital stuff didn't take off because that's got to be a rare blend. Cyberpunk is obviously 20 minutes into the future. Also, I don't know. I honestly don't know why it's called Gothic Punk, but they have a concept of Gothic Punk as like the 80s to 2000s. As in like the goth subculture, as like comparing punks to goths kind of thing.
I guess.
Honestly, this is just this is another one of those cases where, like, this isn't something you actually have to categorize. That's just a certain type of urban fantasy in the 80s to the 2000s, i.e. Vampire the Masquerade, arguably Delta Green, right? Like, just you take the goth aesthetic, which is kind of related to the punk aesthetic, but different, but, like, you can see how those subcultures would get along.
A lot of these subcultures, you can just overlap into the same thing.
Right.
Like, honestly. But no, everyone's got to have their damn niche. It's like, no, we're this. Oh.
And then there's even more that I've heard about. Like, I've heard about a budding idea of, like, an eco-sensitive punk, like called solar punk. I'm like,
oh my god.
I mean, I can see what you're getting at, but that doesn't sound like that doesn't sound like a solidified genre. Like, even though we say steampunk's not necessarily very punk, if you get at it, it has a lot of core concepts. Most people ignore them just for cogs and hats and steam pipes and stuff.
If you can do a solar punk, is like if the established government is based around solar panel and they're like hoarding that shit because like everyone lives in like giant subterranean cities or some shit.
Yeah, like if you want to turn that into like a thing, you can make it. But like I said, I think that's got to be a relatively new concept. So we talked for like, hold on, let me check the timer. We talked for like 30 minutes about what is cyberpunk. But yeah, so
one of those things that's not really clearly defined, and people just throw labels at. Even after today, even never talk about this, I'm still just gonna throw things on the cyberpunk label just because I know that's what people's gonna easily relate it to.
Oh yeah, well, and like I said, that's why some people call out TV tropes and like, but the idea of building a shared language is not bad. It's just if you use that language wrong, because guess what? Like I said, it is a lot easier sometimes to be like, oh, that's cyberpunk, to like people who may have heard of that, or especially may have heard of the game that's coming out, because that's a big deal. But like, it's a thing.
Yeah, man, it's like.
But cyberpunk fundamentally asks questions, right? Like, it's an examination of establishment, of societal control, and a lot of the questions are based on if technology will help or hurt us, which cyberpunk tends to either have one of two answers to that. It's either science will either become the new mode of the the oppression. Also, by the way, I'm sorry if I got a little weird there. My mic drooped a little bit, so I had to readjust it to be more on point. And the other is that technology's not good or bad. People will just continue to be people about it.
Yeah. It's
which is always a solid concept. But yeah. So
that's something I've been thinking about a lot recently, is that like a lot of things that people like demonize or, like throw shade on aren't really bad actually in concept. It's just that when they go through the application of being used by people, they become actually shit.
Well, yeah, and that's a lot of the constant, like, why are we afraid of the robot uprising? Because if you think about it practically, that's a real, like, on the one hand, I accept that, especially for certain types of AI research, because at some point we'll probably talk about Eclipse Phase, because I think that Eclipse Phase isn't cyberpunk anymore. It's so far beyond that, right? But at the same time, it scratches a lot of the cyberpunk itch with the way it's set up.
I mean, like, Eclipse Phase is a little bit cyberpunk, a lot of Lovecraft, and, just a whole bunch of speculative fiction and science fiction.
Well, yeah, like, if you want me to... I've said this before in many threads about Eclipse Phase. Eclipse Phase literally does whatever you want. Not only because you can do virtual reality to do it, but, like, it is a relatively hard science fiction setting where it is not true to our real life physics. It's usually explicitly points out, like, by the way, like, we accept that this isn't how quantum entanglement actually works, but we're giving players and game masters a plot device so they can beat what would otherwise be a hard physical rule of the universe that's kind of annoying. That's light speed lag, by the way, because, oh my god, when you go to space, light speed lag is actually a big deal. The fact that if you can't send anything faster than light, so you can't send a radio message without lag of hours, days, in some cases, between locations, right? Like, if you want to telephone Jupiter or Saturn, there's a long fucking wait on your phone call.
They actually I actually like how they touched upon this in Interstellar.
Mm-hmm.
With
oh god, Interstellar is such a great movie. I fucking If only it wasn't so long, I would watch it more.
Yeah, like honestly, it's like
that's how I feel about The Dark Knight too. Like I like a lot of Nolan's work, but God, those movies are long. They're hard to rewatch. You gotta block out some time.
Mm-hmm. But like, and see, that's when like going back to Eclipse phase. It's like, yeah, like sometimes you just have to you have to suspend your belief here for a bit. It's like, all right, this is just gonna work. We're just gonna black box it. Now I'm gonna
and then a lot of stuff follows Clark's law, which is any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. Like, how do Pandora gates work? Listen, they are beyond your current model of physics. It's gonna be a few decades before somebody figures it out. For the time being,
it works.
They work, so we're gonna use them because mankind is in a bad spot.
Also, mankind is really reckless. Jesus fucking Christ.
Yeah, there's that too. Like, even those who are about security are arguably reckless in their securityness.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so Eclipse Phase is a really interesting examination of transhuman concepts, I think, and like beyond the punkishness of cyberpunk, like okay, but forget all that. Let's go beyond even that. Let's just go to full blown speculative. What's the universe like, right? Because like there's planet hopping, there's stargating, basically. Like there's a lot of weird planetary romance in it because some worlds are partially terraformed or have their own subcultures and stuff. There's a lot of classical political stuff you get out of classic science fiction. You know, examining certain political themes.
Like, the main thing is, like, literally everyone's mind is uploaded. It's not, like, full-on singularity.
Well, one way they like to say it is that the singularity happened and you may have missed it. Because godlike intelligences did the thing where they hit a turning point from which they never returned, at least as we understood them. But some of us missed out on the boat, so...
Yep.
Which is perfectly okay in certain contexts. But yeah, so it's like... and honestly, that's another thing that some people misunderstand what the singularity is. It's not the techno-rapture.
No.
The concept of a singularity is the idea that once you go past it, you cannot escape from it. It's like a fundamental paradigm shift in human nature. Arguably, we've had technological singularities before. Like... the internet, and the invention of the radio, we have jumped technological levels so much so that our society, our existence cannot go back to the way it was before just because it has become such an important part of our life, right?
But the singularity that everyone thinks of is basically the one where everyone uploads their consciousness into one supermind and escapes the mortal coil.
Yeah, it's the mental singularity a lot of people are thinking about is the point where like the mind-body divide becomes meaningless, and so necessarily does mortality. I am interested in the concept of the singularity, but like I said, I don't think of it as the techno-rapture. That's dumb. I
was actually talking to someone about this recently about how the singularity would work. It's like, and if it's even like physically possible.
Well, yeah, and there's questions about that, too. Like,
yeah,
we have concerns about, Moore's Law stuck with us for a while, but there are concerns about, like, physical limitations in our ability to do certain kinds of processing or power doubling and whatever. So it's a real interesting area. That's going a little past the
you have a brain the size of two fists in your head. very little of that is actually dedicated to you remembering shit and making you who you are. The rest of it is to running your body.
Mm-hmm. And so it's
like how that would affect you in a digital space. Who the fuck knows?
Yeah, and that's something Eclipse Phase kind of writes around. It takes the idea of like mind scanning and uploading as a given, but at the same time, it's a lot of it's like, So people making human-like minds or scanning minds just accept that shit's in there, so they keep it. Like, you when you're digitized, you still have the digital copy of all the shit your mind needs to like move your arms and stuff. So much to the point where like AIs have those built in when they're programmed, like actual human, like generalized AIs, because otherwise they wouldn't function. Because this setting has not quite cracked some stuff, right? Like it's advanced and miraculous. You know, there's widespread nanotechnology. You can assemble something out of raw atoms if you've got a battery pack and some CAD programs, but it's not magic. And I think in some cases, some people have misinterpreted the setting as a lot of magic, but it's really not. We've run a lot of it. We've run a lot of Eclipse Phase. That was one of the first games I ran.
Yeah, the human body is super complex. It's kind of redundant and inefficient, but still complex.
Yeah, your body can do a lot of things to compensate for other shit. But it's also weird, like, you experience phantom pains and whatnot because, hey, guess what? Your mind wasn't built to have the idea that you might lose a chunk somewhere.
That was one of the things that I might need to bring up to my friend next time I see him, is because we were actually talking about if, like, we only have the portions of our brain that deal with memories and whatnot copied over into whatever digital landscape we have. Like, wouldn't we lose all the sense of our body, and basically all we would become is, if we would have no sense of self, we would just be like a giant collection of memories from everyone who's been uploaded to the same thing. In order to probably to do something against that, to probably have to actually upload your entire brain, because for those of you who don't know, there is a part of your brain that basically tells you where all your body parts is. Like,
that is one of your senses, actually. It's called proprioception, the ability to tell where your body parts are.
Yeah, like, basically, to understand it, if you just like, if you're not even looking at it and you move your hand around outside your eye, you will still know exactly where your hand is at all times.
The other common test of if you have good proprioception is close your eyes, touch your nose. You can do it because you know where your fucking nose is. Like, it's not even like a memory thing. You don't have to think about it. It's just close my eyes, hand to my nose, because I know where my own nose is.
Yeah, so, like, if we were to be uploaded digitally, we would still want that, because guess what? That gives us our sense of... That's one of those things that help us develop a sense of self, because otherwise, I'm, like, honestly convinced that if we don't have any sort of self-perception, if we do upload our minds, we are literally just going to merge and combine with whatever data is already in there.
Well, and also another thing, an important thing to think about is what we call, like, sentience or sapience. That's all basically a fancy way of saying self-awareness, right? Like, that's a concept we have. Like, do animals have self-awareness? Some do, but, like, do they have proper introspection like humans do? Because humans really do. We have a weird capacity to introspect, to, like, think about why and how we do stuff and, like, look back. Most animals don't give a fuck about that, not even some of the smart ones.
They're like, no, like this is, like, one of those things of, that kind of calls back last time of instinct versus actually, I don't even know what the verse is, but basically how instinct works against how, like, humans work. Since humans have no instincts, we have to basically figure out everything ourselves. Like, literally, like, we have no blueprints on what to do. We have no to-do list. We have no guidelines. The human brain literally programs itself through pattern recognition.
Arguably, I think some of the non-brain systems have some stuff, like, right, like, you have an autonomous nervous system, right? Like, so your body knows how to breathe and pass waste and stuff, and send signals to your brain to be like, hey, you're hungry. Yeah. Or, hey, you need to sleep. The fight or flight response is a very real thing, but all that's actually outside of your brain. That's all, like, other shit that's, like, sends messages to your brain to remind you, hey, you're still meat, buddy. Yeah. You got to do meat things.
Yeah, but as I said, like, all our I'll say like 99% of our behavioral stuff, it's all outside influence.
Well, yeah, a lot of our stuff is learned. Like you are born with a capacity. Well, in a certain sense, you're born with the eventual capacity to walk. Probably, your muscles are all arranged in the way so that you can learn to walk, and the way you learn to walk is almost like an instinctual thing in that once you learn to walk, it's hard to forget how to walk, right? Like, you'd have, even if you, actually, I should probably do some research on that. If people have been like if they've been confined to wheelchairs for a long time because of an injury, but they can walk normally again, like, how big of a gap is there before you have to, quote unquote, learn how to walk again? Like, in some cases, there's a lot of physical therapy to make sure that you're...
long times of rehabilitation, because that's one of the things that rehabilitation does. It builds up your muscles again.
Well, yeah, that's what I was about to say, though. I know there's, like, a physical component. Like, you have to train your muscles to be able to bear your weight properly and stuff again. But do you actually need to, like, remember what the basic function of, like, I need to, like, put this foot down and balance my weight in such a way, etc.? Or does your natural sense of balance and muscle control take care of that, even if you aren't walking for a while? So that's always an interesting question. Like, muscle memory is a very interesting idea, right?
Mm-hmm. Everyone, don't take the actions that you can do every day for granted.
Mm-hmm. But at the same time,
like, you guys remember playing Co-op?
Yeah. I don't think I ever really bothered much, but yeah, no, like, That's a very good illustration of the simple concept of, like, hey, walking isn't necessarily easy for humans. Most animals are born knowing how to walk, because if they can't walk, they get it. Yep. But at the same time, most animals can't learn to do, like, addition or subtraction pretty early either. Or learn how to write. What's the earliest you can learn how to write? I think it's like 4 or 5 is the earliest some people pick up, like, reading and writing and language.
Oh man, no, there's been cases of kids learning, like, sign language at, like, 1 to 2 years old.
Wow. All right, so that's not even, like, actually that's probably pretty interesting, because that means that you're more adept learning how to associate your hand gestures with concepts, as opposed to developing how to move your mouth and, like, fine motor control for, like, writing.
Yeah.
It's very interesting.
It's, because, like I was saying before, it's all pattern recognition. So, like, a child isn't gonna, like, especially when you're still, like, developing, it's easier for a child to recognize, like, hand motions to be associated with a particular thing and mimic that than trying to, because, people might not recognize it, but people talk to babies a lot. And just people, like, humans just talk a lot in general. So for a developing child, it's kind of hard to pick out what is, like, the associated word, and that's, like, is a develop. That's like develop. That's why they learn things like their name first, or like dad, mom, stuff like that, because it's something that's often repeated, and it's repeated in a certain area, so they learn to associate that word with a particular person. The same can be done with an action in sign language. It's like, it's not something that's going to be more natural. You actually have to put in the effort for the child to learn the sign language, but there has been several cases of it, especially actually, like, at an earlier age.
Reminded me of something that I hadn't thought about in a while I was up getting my water, but I distinctly remember with my eldest sister's first child, she actually taught her to do a specific gesture when she wanted more food.
Mm-hmm.
Not like full-blown sign language, though it may have been based on that, but it was like, do this if you want more. And so they actually had, like, a little back and forth, even as a small child.
Yeah, so I just looked it up real quick, but it says basically some babies can learn simple signs as young as 6 months. They might not be able to have the hand control to be able to sign back until like 8 or 9 months.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, as I said, like, when a kid's born, they literally a blank slate. You can just start cramming as much into them as, like, you can. It's just...
And then the joy of Cyberpunk is cramming other stuff into you once you're already grown up. I brought it back.
Yeah, there's some interesting concepts that come from that, but again, they usually do a hand wave around.
Well, yeah, a lot of stuff is like we're accepting that certain technologies or applications of technology are inevitable, but obviously, if we could do the legwork to explain how they work, we wouldn't be writing cyberpunk fiction. We'd be winning awards.
Yeah, that's what I enjoyed about Deus Ex and how they had this whole thing about implant rejection. Yeah,
which is interesting, by the way, because that's actually been debunked. Like, literally, after Deus Ex came out in our modern time, they developed ways to get around autoimmune responses to, like, prosthetic implementation. They just use I think they use, like, a medium that has some of your own biomaterial on it, so your body doesn't reject the part where the bits touch. But it was still a solid concept to Deus Ex, which was like, hey, implant rejection at some stage is a thing. How do you deal with that? So like they turned it into a very cyberpunk thing with like the dealing with the systems of control to deal with the drugs and how that affects and how that keeps people reliant and stuff like that.
Yeah,
and then Mankind Divided got into like social stratification because of it.
Yep. It's like I would call like the two new Deus Ex cyberpunk, but not full on cyberpunk, because you're not like Adam. I didn't ask for this. Jensen isn't full on dystopian fighter. He's like he's kind of a rebel.
Yeah,
because
he especially in MD
Mankind.
where he's a double agent basically.
Yeah,
like that's him doing real cyberpunk stuff where he's like part of a resistance movement or a underground movement that has infiltrated a government agency to find a conspiracy, right? But in the first one, he's basically just he's a corp detective who ends up sucked into a wider conspiracy because it beat him up and kidnapped his girlfriend. But he's still a corporate tool.
Yeah.
But yeah, so there's like...
I hope the third game is full on anarchy. Yeah.
Well, yeah, it'll be interesting because Deus Ex is obviously based on an earlier setting, which is way in the future. The original Deus Ex on PC is like a bridge from traditional cyberpunk like robotic implants to nanotech in a advanced sense. So like the main character has cybernetics, but they're a lot less obvious and a lot lower impact because they're based on nanotech in him.
Ah, yes, the great hand wave of the future. Nanomachine.
Nanomachine, son! The great memes of our time. But yeah, and I get, like, again, nanotech's one of those things that people fundamentally goof up. On some level, I blame Michael Crichton's Prey, because, well, that freaked me the fuck out. Actually, honestly, Prey was probably a more realistic take, but still, it was still very weird about stuff. Like, in certain types of controlled environments, the nanomachines could, like, get out and fly around in free-floating swarms. That's, like, way in the future because, hey, do you know what nano refers to? It's a very tiny scale.
Yeah, we can't build... Well, I don't know if we can, like, build things that small.
I mean, we can make some stuff
small,
because,
but...
like, certain carbon structures are very, very interesting. What they call, like, carbon nanotubes. Like, those are actually on, like, scales of nanometers. By the way, in case anyone is curious, a nanometer is 1 billionth of a meter, as in 1 billion nanometers make up one regular meter.
Yeah.
So it's fucking tiny.
Not visible to the human eye.
God, no. It's not, like, most micro things are already not visible to our eyes.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so that's a very interesting idea, but, like, as implants, oh yeah, no, nanoscale tech will definitely eventually be a thing, right?
Eventually.
Just because it's so small. If you can actually build, basically, synthetic proteins and cells.
We have made, like, stupid leaps and bounds in the process of miniaturization in the past 25 years, I want to say.
Yeah,
like mid-90s.
Like we talked about last time about like how warfare has made a lot of technology accessible. Modern military tech is all about miniaturization and battery life.
Yeah.
Because literally that's the only thing stopping certain kinds of tech from being used, like railguns or other magnetic acceleration weapons.
Mm-hmm.
We have functional prototypes we could put on ships right now, just there's no materials that can reliably power them and withstand the forces generated yet to make them feasible. They're just not worth the money yet.
Yep.
Lots of tech with cell phones comes from that, is like and laptops is building more rugged computers and phones that can be carried places. Though obviously there are certain size restrictions to some stuff because hey, guess what? Antennas are important.
Mm-hmm.
I think it'll be interesting to see what stuff Cyberpunk 2077 is working with specifically, because like we said, the original version was like 2013. It was actually just called Cyberpunk, but it was set in 2013. The second edition came out a couple later with Cyberpunk 2020. If you actually crack open a Cyberpunk 2020 book from like the 80s or 90s, it would be the 90s, I guess. It was 90. I think it said it was 1990. But
yeah.
if you
early 90s.
Crack open an early 90s book, they're full of stuff like a built-in 56K modem, and 500 something kilobytes of RAM, like the same mistakes lots of classic fiction did, because they did not realize how far we were going to go. Storage technology today is a miracle. I own a terabyte drive. It's sitting right over there. It was not even the best model I could buy. It was the cheapest.
Yeah.
Because I don't need more. We're up to like, I want to say 2 to 4 terabytes and stuff. SD cards, or even micro SD cards, terrifying. You can get a couple of those in terabyte sizes. The size of your thumbnail. You can stick a whole terabyte.
Nowadays, and now we've already made the next step with solid state drives. It's like, all right, so we want the same amount of space, but faster.
So a terabyte is a unit of information equal to 1 million, or 10 to the 12th power bytes. It's a lot of fucking bytes. It's, yeah.
Do you know what I learned the other day? I find it interesting. You might know this because you're smart. But for all you out there who wants a little bit of egghead knowledge, half of a byte is called a nibble.
I didn't know that. That's cute. That's the thing with it's interesting that computer technology is entirely built by like nerds.
Yeah.
Right, who are interested in computers, so there's lots of dumb stuff in there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so a kilobyte is 1,000 bytes. A megabyte is 1,000 to the second power bytes. Gigabit is, 1,000 to 3. Terabyte is 1,004. Do we have any functional petabyte storage? That's the next step up.
Oh, man.
We have petabytes of data which exist, but I don't know if we've got any actual petabyte storage yet.
I mean, I'm pretty sure someone could hook it up. It's just, not cost effective.
Yeah,
It's always what it comes down to. Oh, man. So, how long have we been going on just, Cyberpunk in general?
About an hour.
All right.
Okay, so somebody's apparently marketing something called a peta rack, which is a server rack, which is a petabyte of storage. So,
yeah.
It's an installation. It's not like I said, I own a terabyte passport drive. I can fit that in a fucking pocket.
Yeah.
But someday we'll get to something like that. Because we will keep pushing our storage medium, whether it'll be like miniaturization or detail, or whether maybe it will be a functional nanoscale thing where we just find a way to build tools that small that we can store more data.
Who knows? Maybe we'll finally map the human brain and how it works and use that as a reference. Because the human...
Well, honestly, there's also a big question of how much data is actually in the human brain.
Yeah.
Experts can't agree yet.
No. That's what I'm saying. One day we'll figure it out.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, like I said, Cyberpunk
remember,
will be the actual Cyberpunk game will be very interesting to see what technology they think of, because obviously now the original game is a little retro. There is a Cyberpunk 2077 version, but I don't know when that came out even. So it'll be really interesting to see. There's obviously a little bit of retro future because the genre was, like I said, it was pioneered in the early 80s and it was popularized in the late 80s, early 90s. And now that stuff is retro, right? Like, because that's the thing that always cycles. There's always your modern pop culture, and there's always a resurgence of stuff in that modern pop culture of a certain decade of previous pop culture. When I was young, I watched a show called That 70s Show, because that was the decade gap. By the way, I'm pretty sure we're coming up on an appropriate gap now, that from when the same gap between when the 70s ended and when That 70s Show was released as we are on the 90s. So that's a little freaky that they could make That 90s Show now.
Like, this reminds me, they actually did this show a lot earlier than that. I actually think they did it in, like, the 2000s, but VH1's I Love, like, the whatevers. Like, they did I Love the 70s, I Love the 80s, I Love the 90s.
Around the early to mid 2000s, there was a lot of like decade retrospectives because it was a new decade, century, and millennium. So there was a lot of retrospective in that period.
If you want to get like a full on feel of like what culture was and what was big on back there, like go watch those, because I fucking loved watching them.
An important thing to remember also about cultural decades is they don't end when the decade ends, because that's not how humans work. No. We're analog, not digital. So like 80s culture persisted a couple years into the 90s. Luckily, I was born a couple years into the 90s, so I don't fucking remember any of that. Like, I was a conscious, alive person by the late 90s. Though I do remember some outskirts of mid to early 90s culture. Like, some stuff was still in syndication or in, like, the tail end of production by the time I was paying attention. There was a great document that was, like, identify your generation by looking at the pop culture. And if you look at it, and it's just like common TV, movies that were cultural landmarks, and eventually video games. And like, if you look at them arranged in a collage, you can be like, oh shit, that's me. I'm that block right there, because that's the stuff that was all new on TV when I was a kid. Those were the first video games I played. And it's a little freaky. But we are definitely currently in a bit of a retro kick on, like, I think the 80s style. Part of it, I think, is sociopolitical. Like, we're hey, guess what? We talked about this. Human nature doesn't change, so we're still grappling with some of the issues that we grappled with in the 80s. I haven't said we've been grappling with them since longer. Shoot. Probably. It's just, I think that the 80s was a time when certain, like, that's why it's cyberpunk. That's when certain technical aspects of this came out, right? Like, I just clunked the shit out of my pop filter. Whoops. Sorry about that, guys. But I'm trying to Google. Let's see. When was the first home PC? What was the first real personal computer? I gotta remember, like, one of the biggest scandals that happened, like, during that time was Nixon's Watergate scandal, which happened in the early 70s, which called into question a lot of got people questioning the government, like, a lot, especially that caused a lot of suspicion. Also, another thing to think about is immediately after the 80s, or late 80s, early 90s, that was the X-Files era, and also the same era as Delta Green. If you guys aren't familiar with Delta Green, basically, it's not a ripoff of the X-Files. They were parallel developments. It was the same culture that caused them. But basically, if you're familiar with the Call of Cthulhu, or the game, or H.P. Lovecraft's work in general, just imagine, instead of being set about lots of concerns that Lovecraft and his peers had about the 20s and stuff, because a lot of the existential shit Lovecraft was talking about was basically thinking about advancements in science, like early quantum theory, some of Einstein's early theories, and figuring out the building blocks of the universe, which really were like, God, we're really not important, are we? So Delta Green kind of ports over a lot of those aspects into, like, early UFO culture, government conspiracy culture, stuff like that. So they're parallel developments. So the Apple II was released in 1977. So yeah, so the 80s would be right around the turn of like owning computers at your home, kind of thing, the home computer revolution, and stuff like that. So that's why I say that there are certain cultural touchstones which are why some of that stuff I think rose to prominence. Honestly, we're the same way now. Like, it's not so much that home computers are a thing, but I think that in our current time, like the mid to late new tens is smartphones and just internet access in general. Almost everybody owns a smartphone. Almost everybody has Google in their pocket, right? Like a lot of our cultural crisis is about informatics and just how do you process information? Because we talked about there's shitloads of data out there. We can store it all, and we can access it in a portable format. It's just figuring out how to correctly apply that data is very big to us now, I think. And I think that's why Cyberpunk is kind of coming back, besides just the obvious, like, people thinking, golly gee, computer-using corporations may really run our lives, which is one aspect, I think, why it came back, right? Like, because people look at companies like Google, Facebook, Amazon, Microsoft. Microsoft is less evil than they were in the past. I think they've kind of flipped a switch. Arguably, some of the stuff that other tech companies do, and just be like, guys, does this sound familiar to you? Did I read about this once? Oh shit. But yeah, no, like it's really interesting, I think, to see that come back. But that's the aesthetics of Cyberpunk 2077 are definitely like a retro future. Like there's a lot of neon, there's a lot of random Japanese, which was because for those of you who don't know, because you might be younger, in the 80s there was a huge concern about the Japanese economy taking over the world because they were the economic superpower, right? Like they had a strong growing economy, they were cornering consumer electronics, automobiles, all that stuff. They were beating us, the US, in a lot of aspects. And then, I'm not entirely sure why, but their economy basically folded. They had a type of inflation, like, even today, 1 yen is worth, like, a couple of cents, I think, right? Like when you think about yen, you think in units of hundreds as opposed to, like 100 yen is 100 yen store is equivalent to a dollar store in the US, right? Yeah. And I don't know if other countries even have that, but just imagine, like, if you've got, like, a 1 euro store or whatever, which you might, or a 1 Canadian dollar store. It's that sort of thing. So, like, I don't know why the Japanese economy did a thing, but it did a thing. So they no longer became able to control the world. But, like I said, Cyberpunk 77 has a lot of influence of that. Blade Runner had a lot of influence of that. Lots of classic Cyberpunk does. And, though arguably Japan is, like, if you watch, like, Japanese things with Cyberpunk themes, like Ghost in the Shell, like Psychopaths, because we can say that Psychopaths even explicitly calls out Gibson and Dick, right? Like, it explicitly calls to this fictional genres, even though, like we've said earlier, it's not really akin to a cyberpunk, because
you can still you can still gather inspiration for something, even if it's not like a direct reference.
The aesthetics were inspired by it, but obviously the actual, if you want to get into the actual nitty-gritty of the genre, it doesn't necessarily hit all the checkboxes, right? Like, but it's definitely in the same spirit, which is interesting. But, like, it's really interesting to see Japanese works in a cyberpunk theme, because I think their society is honestly freakishly close to the cyberpunk future. Like, they're working on robots to deal with people a lot. They've got a lot of concerns about, like, young people and their work ethic. They've got a declining population, technically, because the Japanese birth rate is terrible. And they have a lot of weird stuff going on with, like, government agencies and stuff at sometimes. It's very interesting. That's a lot of, like, Psychopaths especially is meant to be critical about a lot of aspects of Japanese society. Which is where a lot of good stuff is born from. But yeah, that's why I think Cyberpunk's coming back a little. And the aesthetics of 2077, some people are weirded out by, because it's not literally Blade Runner. Honestly, one, I think half those people are going to buy the fucking game anyway, and then pretend to be mad about it. But two, hey, if this doesn't fit your narrow ideal of what the cyberpunk aesthetic is, fine. fuck off. It fits my idea of the cyberpunk aesthetic perfectly. Like I said earlier, cyberpunk doesn't have to take place at night. Several important parts of Snow Crash, which was another major cyberpunk-ish touchstone, I got later. Though I would also argue that cyberpunk Snow Crash is in the same vein of like Ghost in the Shell. It's almost like a post-cyberpunk, like they're independent actors, but they work with arguably government agencies and like corporations to fight other corporations and government agencies from a conspiracy because it would be bad for them too, right? Like, arguably post-cyberpunk is almost more practical or pragmatic, like more real politic even. Like, hey, yeah, guess what? Like, even if you're an evil corporation, let alone if you're just a normal, functional, amoral corporation, you don't want other evil corporations to succeed because then they win.
Yeah.
So, like, that's, like I said, that's almost like a more pragmatic approach to it, because sometimes with cyberpunk you get the idea that, oh, all those corpos and their high-rise apartments, they're all working together. No, that's not where the real juice is of the story.
Like, a lot of, like, cyberpunk actually has, like those low-running guys working for corporations, usually to fuck over other corporations. Because guess what? Those corps are usually the one who's paying the big money. Mm-hmm. And you need money no matter what kind of genre you live in.
Cyberpunk is like that. Well, some of Cyberpunk is like that. You can play a fixer or a corp guy, or you could be completely rebellious. Shadowrun is explicitly like that, though. That's the whole point of a Shadowrun, is it's a run in the shadows. You're doing a job for somebody shady, Mr. Johnson, who is undoubtedly a corp guy, paying you loads of money to fuck other corp guys or criminal syndicates or whatever. Mm-hmm. But I think the question is, like, between like post cyberpunk and cyberpunk is like the possible altruism or positive aspect, the idea that between, like, the cynical take is, oh no, the corporations or government are definitely doing it just because they want to fuck people over their way, or it could just be like, no, humans have the capacity for altruism. They can be like, gee, we could pay somebody to stop this thing, which would fuck over a bunch of people for no reason, because, hey, actually fucking over people for no reason doesn't profit us any. Like, you can have a more positive outlook, right? Like, it's possible.
Yeah. See, that's the only one of those few things that bug me in writing, is when people make things evil just to make them evil. Like, for no reason. Like, it's an evil corporation doing evil things. It's like, why?
If you want to talk about characterization and bias in writing, that's a whole different topic, which should probably be saved for a different episode, because we're already hour 15 deep on this one.
Yeah.
But, like, we could turn that into a whole discussion topic. But yes, no, no matter what your political affiliation is, no matter what your beliefs are, shitty strawmen and demonization antagonists are shitty. It's bad writing. Good writing has depth to antagonists, or at the very least, if you do create an evil burn the world type antagonist, those work better as singular personalities, and they should have big fucking personalities, right? Like, you should be able to see. They basically need to be way more interesting because their motivations aren't intrinsically interesting, right?
Yeah.
Because you want to tell an interesting story no matter what. So, which I think part of the problem is we drop the interesting story aspect and we just get to the, I want to Shanghai you I want to bamboozle you into believing my beliefs.
And then you're just like, I'm just going to shoot you.
Oh, and then you're just like, God, that's just shitty writing. You're trying to trick me into following your particular socio-political belief system by making a story where your system sounds really cool. Like, if you want good writing that reflects a lot of stances, check out both C.S. Lewis's Chronicles of Narnia and then his Dark Materials, because those book series arguably contrast a whole shitload, because by the time you get to the last battle in Chronicles of Narnia, what C.S. Lewis is getting at, because he is an unapologetic Christian apologist and a born Catholic, is, the whole thing's a Jesus metaphor. Narnia becomes heaven. And there are some unsubtle hits. But it takes like 12 books to get there. And throughout the way, a lot of those good Christian morals are just general good morals and life lessons for people, right? Like, it's just arguably it's still just a solid heroic fantasy story. And his Dark Materials is similar. That's very atheist. It's super critical of organized religion and the concepts of deities at all. God is a lie and all that. But God, it can still tell a really compelling story about scientific examination versus, blind faith and assumption.
I'm always super impressed.
I read and enjoyed both of those.
Yeah. It's like, good on C.S. Lewis.
Mm-hmm.
Fuck, man.
Yeah. And arguably, I mean, I think that was... If you want to say that was C.S. Lewis's one problem, that would be probably fair, that he had a trouble keeping his beliefs out of his narratives. Like, some of his other works are definitely a little more preachy almost. They're definitely much more philosophical, as opposed to, like, J.R.R. Tolkien, who is a contemporary who was way more into his linguistics and world-building aspects, really, than his particular moral or ethical beliefs. Because his work is all just building mythology.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's always an interesting thing, like, when you see that. And arguably, I think a lot of people take Cyberpunk the wrong way. Like we said that, like, people take the punkishness and the obvious rebellion against authority as, like, an obvious sign that, ooh, corporations are all evil, or, ooh, your government will fail you, and then they'll be taken over by corporations, and they'll become evil. No, it's about... The punkishness is about the rebellion against systems of control and authority. Right? Like... And we've had this discussion, absolutely no systems of control is arguably shittier, because while anarchy is quite punk, from a practical standpoint, it's not necessarily an improvement, right? Like, when you enter a chaotic period, that's usually just as shitty as the period that preceded it before, just in different ways. You need to move out of chaos into a new order, which is hopefully less shitty to you.
And that's what I think. That's like one we talked about, like the very first What's Up. Like, anarchy is literally just a state of transitions between two forms of order.
Yeah, chaos is the transition between disorder and order.
Yeah.
So, like I think there are socio-political philosophies that use anarchy in a more classical or literal definition that might have some merit, but in general, like, the actual concept of anarchy as in... actually, let's double check. What's the actual Greek root of anarchy supposed to be? So it's... So, literally, the archy means ruler, leader, or authority, so, and then anarchia is without. So the literal definition of anarchy is without ruler, leader, or authority. And now you can argue, like, how that works out, but, like, we definitely turned anarchism into, like, a different system. And we can argue whether or not that's some of those those philosophical, some are philosophical, but those political concepts could work, but the literal idea of anarchy is just, with no hierarchy or no rulers, is just a transition, because
human society can't function like that.
Well, we talked about this. Humans are self-ordering. We will build some kind of social structure. Can you make non-hierarchical social structures? Probably. I think you'd have to start from a 0 point and be like, we are deliberately engineering our society to be non-hierarchical. And that's like we talked about. That's like getting into all that political theory, which is probably beyond us, because, hey, guess what? Out of the classes I didn't take philosophy or political science in college.
I did take philosophy before I dropped out, but as I said, I dropped out of college, so don't look at me.
That would be like something we probably want to read into. Because, especially from Eclipse Phase, because Eclipse Phase has a lot of variable government systems. There are anarcho-capitalist systems, anarcho-socialist or syndicalist systems. There are full-blown socialist systems. I should say anarcho-communist, really, because socialism implies a state order. So there's socialist systems. There are supposedly liberal democratic systems. There are arguably military dictatorship systems, and then there's everything in between, because the human diaspora from Earth, and the fact that with minimal physical resources, you can, build your own society pretty easy. There are pockets, with, like, asteroids and space stations with, like, a few dozen dudes trying out all kinds of stuff. Which is one of the reasons why I like the setting, because arguably it can make it unfocused, but as far as, like, as a game master or as a writer, basically, trying to figure out plots and interesting stories, little details like that are great, because you just realize, oh god, I can literally throw anything in. I could, build a society where they assert that our early 20th century, 21st century gender roles are literally flipped. Or human biology is flipped. Or we can be like, nobody has any gender in this place, and what's our social structure like there? You can do so every week we elect a king, and whatever the king says goes for a week. But when the week is done, we know that his rule no longer applies, and we pick a new one. Like, you can do all kinds of weird stuff with that, also in space.
Space.
Robots and AIs and stuff. God, I love. Space is a thing I don't think we've fully touched on, but I fucking love space. Space stuff is so cool.
I think space stuff is so cool just because we get into the wide branch of science fiction and basically the taste of anything goes. Because, like, here's the thing, like, science fiction is literally your fucking passport to say, alright, I can literally come up with whatever I want. And people do.
Mm-hmm. Well, here's the thing you need to know about space. Space is big. Really big. You just won't believe how vastly, hugely, mind-bogglingly big it is. I mean, you might think it's a long way down the road to the chemist, but that's just peanuts compared to space.
Space is, well, can't say infinite, but it's as close as infinite as you're going to ever get to infinite.
Yeah, there's some serious discussion on how infinite or not infinite space is going over the years.
And
physics
here's the thing, when you have that
astrophysics.
much space, there is a lot of stuff in it.
Yeah, but basically, like, if you think about it, we talked about, like, the solar system itself is so huge that light, literally the fastest thing in the universe, by definition, as far as our current understanding of physics goes, has to take time to get around all of it.
I think it takes years.
I mean, I can pull up... I've got all the Eclipse Phase PDFs, because the other beautiful thing about Eclipse Phase is that it is and always has been Creative Commons share alike, so, like, they just put up a lot of their documents for free and shit, and you can share them, as long as you don't change any of the watermarks and stuff.
Pluto.
But let's see.
Oh, wait, never mind. Oh, I take that back. It takes 5.3 hours. I thought it was years.
Now, that's, like, orbits and stuff, which get mind-bogglingly long to do certain orbits once you get to the outer planets. But yeah, no, space is huge. It's full of shit. You can do a lot of fun stuff with it. Asteroids and asteroid belts are pretty interesting, because you can, especially if you take certain sci-fi concepts, because, God, we've been thinking about space habitation for years. There are a lot of interesting space habitat thoughts, like the traditional torus, which is the spinning, rotating type you may have seen in 2001: A Space Odyssey. That's named after a design which was figured out how to simulate gravity by making a spinning wheel. Similar concept is the O'Neill cylinder, which was thought up by a guy called O'Neill, which is basically a long tube habitat with mirrors to gather sunlight that spins for gravity.
Yeah, basically, I personally, I love the O'Neills, because I always like the concept of being... It's basically Halo. It's like you basically can see the other side from the interior.
Like, literally you look up and you see... In most designs, if you literally look up, you would see directly above you the mirror or window, but you can see more of your habitat on the roof, basically.
Yeah. Gotta maximize space, you know?
Another good concept is the coal bubble, which is basically you take a metallic asteroid, you melt and spin it so that it forms a crust, and you basically form a hollow bubble. Lots of cool concepts there. And so that's another thing that's great about Eclipse Phase. It has all that stuff. You can explore a lot of it. You can do a lot of stuff that I've written a lot of stuff to deal with some of those stuffs. Very interesting.
God, I'm just playing games. Tabletop, excuse me.
Yeah. We'll get there somewhere. And maybe Cyberpunk 2077 will be some of our fix. I'm trying to think, like, was there any more points about that trailer or that idea that I really want to talk about. And I think we hit most of them. Like just the like, I'm not overhyped. I don't think the game has promised me anything that it's not showing me. Right? Like,
yeah, no.
It's
like,
an open world. There's lots of people in it. The people have individual labels, so that's cool. Is every quest going to be super interactive? Probably not. Are there going to be multiple dialogue options that do different stuff? Sure. Are there going to be flags and stuff? Sure. It'll do what I want, I think, out of a game.
That's it. Like, I'm hyped for it because I just want a new good game. I want a good Cyberpunk game.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not overhyped.
Yeah, that's always a weird thing. And some of that might be on developers for leaving questions, because the human mind naturally fills in blanks. But honestly, some of that I think is on the culture of expectation.
Oh, yeah.
Like, a lot of people were upset that the original Watch Dogs, like, seemed like it promised a lot of stuff, and it didn't, because they were like, oh, you can hack everything. I mean, you can basically hack everything that can be hacked, per se, in that game, even though it doesn't make any sense. But that's not what people thought it would be, right? Like, it's... Yeah. Oh, you can hack a person's phone to get their personal data. Well, the game's not meant to simulate, like, long-term consequences of that. You just find out dumb stuff about people. And some of them have phone data you can use, like, you find, like, a PayPal account unsecured on their phone or something, or you find, program data you can use for, like, exploits and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Or shit like that. You can find code keys to other things. Like, okay, you can turn off cameras and stuff or enslave them. But I think some of that is just people thinking this game's going to be more than it was. No Man's Sky is another example of that. Like, I think a lot of people took the fact that it would be open and spacey too far. Like, some of it was they promised concepts they couldn't execute directly. Like, they vaguely alluded to multiplayer, and it has literally only just been in the past couple of months, considering how long the game has been out, that they actually have literal multiplayer in No Man's Sky, right? Where you can literally see your buddy right next to you. Though that isn't now. But, like I said, people, I think, assumed too much about that. I saw it, and I still kind of want to play it, maybe, because I like that sort of game. I saw it, and I'm just like, oh, so it's just like Minecraft, Terraria, Starbound, that kind of stuff. There's a certain amount of procedural generation. You go to a place, you collect resources, you build some shit, you move on.
Mm-hmm.
You find new shit. Like, what are you expecting from that, right? Like, it's...
Mm-hmm. What I'm into, like, what I kind of want to play is, like, I want to play Star Citizen.
That'll be interesting, I think. I'm not too invested in that, but I would like to see it when it finally comes out.
Yeah.
A good... when I was younger, I played Escape Velocity, which is a very interesting series that was mostly on Mac. My house was Mac computers for a very long time until it was just... There was a period, like, in the early 2000s where... Basically, between when Apple invented the iPod and the iPhone, where... On a practical level, it was like, well, shit, you have to get a PC because nothing fucking runs on Mac. There was a brief slice of time where that was a thing, right? Where just because of the accessibility and stuff, Microsoft, so many more programs were made for Windows, games were made for Windows, web stuff was more compatible with certain types of Windows stuff.
It's still kind of that way.
It's still kind of that way. It's better. And most Mac computers, if you really want to, can basically clone Windows to run their programs anyway. But there was a brief period before Apple kicked the teeth in of certain other electronics markets where, like, Apple computers were neat, but, like, they were almost a luxury item because they were very expensive, and buying all of Apple's in-house stuff could be pretty expensive.
Oh, yeah.
So we switched to PCs, but I played a lot of Escape Velocity, which is a very basic-ass sci-fi simulator. You fly around, you do cargo missions, deliveries of, like, passengers and cargo and stuff. You can shoot people sometimes. And then there were, like, broad plot missions in the background that were cool. Look it up sometimes. So that's a cool concept to me that I don't know if I've ever quite found a game that scratches that childhood itch the same way.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe I just haven't found the right game.
Oh man, games.
Yeah, we've talked a lot about our early pop culture. Video games are way into that. Like, there are a lot of
let's say, like,
game
after
stuff.
the collapsing of the gaming bubble with E.T.'s Atari, Like, video games was fucking... I mean, Atari's ET. I don't know why I said that, by the way. Like, video games were looking kind of weird, and then they just, like... Japan's like, check out this family entertainment system.
Yeah. And they killed it. And then they came out with a sequel that was improved. That was where I got in. I got in on the SNES era when I was about 4 or 5.
Yeah, that's where I started.
I think I was playing Super Nintendo before I could read properly. Which was fine. Hey, guess what? Those games were perfectly playable even before I had, like, a working on... a functional understanding of written language. Because just the buttons are just symbols. You press them to do certain things. We talk about like muscle memory and stuff. It's that easy. Played, Super Mario All-Stars, Super Mario World, F-Zero. Hey, Nintendo, can you do me a solid? Can you release a fucking F-Zero game? I don't think you've done that since GameCube, and I never owned one of those either.
I prefer Wipeout.
Yeah. That's okay. I know, everybody's all about the fucking Mario Kart, but F-Zero, man.
I can play me some Mario Kart, but just something about, like F-Zero and Wipeout, like, just that high-speed turns, like, crazy-ass tracks.
Like... pure racing. Because Mario Kart is a game you race with friends to yell at them. I think is the best way to describe it. F-Zero wasn't that. It was all just, can you beat these courses that have, like, these weird stuff? And when you get to the King Cup, those courses are fucking hard. Whiteout 3. Also, for F-Zero in particular, I don't think I ever really played Wipeout, so I can't comment, but F-Zero has very iconic music. To this day, I hum Big Blue and Mute City to myself occasionally.
I remember Big Blue.
Yeah, everybody does.
That was a good one.
Very iconic.
Man, like, thinking about it, like, I think actually my favorite probably racing genre is actually be the Burnout series. Because, yeah, you don't get weapons or stuff, but you can still, like, shove someone into a guardrail and keep going.
Yeah, no. That's definitely a cool concept.
Yeah, like, and you get points just from how good you make the fucking crash.
I was very briefly into Need for Speed during the Underground era.
Yeah, everyone, it's all like, Need for Speed, Underground. I think most wanted is, like, what people go to next.
Yeah, but
actually,
the Underground era was really good because that was when street racing was taking off. It had it was one of those games with, like, licensed music, so you could, it had a couple different types of music, which was interesting to me because my musical taste has always been skewed. Like I said, my parents are a little bit older, so growing up I heard a lot of, like, classical rock in cars and stuff. Obviously well, at least there was a time in the universe when they showed music in video form on televisions. Some of you kids these days might not know about, but MTV used to show music videos all the time, and
they used to only have one channel.
Disney Channel back in the day, I'm pretty sure they don't do this anymore, but Disney Channel used to, in commercial break time, play music videos for bands and their records. Like, you could see some Britney Spears that way, some Backstreet Boys, I think. Maybe it was NSYNC. I think it was might have been both of them. But, like, they played music videos of top kid-friendly, like, pop stars and stuff back in the day. Like, so that was my music experience for a long time. So some video games helped broaden that out.
I was actually looking. Need for Speed Payback comes out in November. I might pick that up.
I might. Let me know how it is, because then watching that trailer obviously makes me wonder about stuff, because it, Need for Speed is an interesting style.
Easily, like, I don't mind racing games, but they have to be interesting racing games. You just can't put me on a track and say go and maybe go around.
You're not a Forza type, which I'm not either. Like the broad open world on the racing everywhere and stuff, and smashing hundreds of year-old stone fences. We joked about that a lot at E3. That's got its own merit, but yeah, it's not super interesting to me. That's like why I'm not real fussed about the driving in Cyberpunk, because I'm like, okay, so we'll get a cool future car. There'll be, like, some weird interactions. Maybe you can put a gun in some of the cars or something. Whatever.
I like cars as a mechanic. Like, hey, let me get to point A to point B. Maybe I need to get to point A to point B faster. Maybe I can, like, find a shortcut some other way. But it's not the driving itself.
Yeah, because God knows once again, youngsters, fast travel was not always a thing. That was
Sometimes I think people have been spoiled by fast travel.
I mean, they have, but at the same time, they've been spoiled with good reason, because fast travel's just, God, it took way too long to invent, in some cases.
It's like, that's one of those things, like, playing fucking Skyrim, like, I, like, always end up just abusing fast travel, and I always feel like I'm missing out, because, like, especially with Skyrim, some of the greatest adventures you can have is when you actually walk from point A to point B.
Well, like, yeah, and like, I think the beautiful thing about Skyrim is that they're smart. You cannot fast travel to anywhere you haven't been to before, which is a classic fast travel rule. But for Skyrim especially, it really works. If you're like, oh, fuck, I got a quest to go to a mountaintop dungeon in the middle of fucking nowhere, like, at the very least, you have to hike to that place once. And depending on what's close by you, you may be like, ah, God, I don't want to have to go through loading screens and all that. I will just hoof it overland to the next town or whatever.
And see, this is why I particularly love Skyrim on PC, because and you can add shit like Frostfall, which adds like hunger, warmth, and all that shit. And so like planning out these fucking treks becomes like an actual like plan. It's like, all right, I gotta make sure I have firewood. I'm going up into the colder regions. I gotta bundle up. Let me grab some torches so I can stay warm. It's like you actually feel like you're going on a fucking trip. Like, and like I like that sense of adventure. I really do.
Yeah. I can take or leave that with some games. I've definitely played some more survival focused games where I'm like, oh yeah, no, this is the right spot. But also sometimes I'm just like, listen, I'm just here to yell at dragons and stab skeletons and tombs. Like it's the D&D problem, right? Like,
yeah.
Depending on your group or your just personal feelings that day, some days you're just like, listen, I just want to go to a dungeon and I want to kill skeletons. Okay, I don't want to fuck around with like, did I bring enough firewood? That said, when I'm running games a lot of the time, I like those aspects because depending on what you're doing, it can be real easy for players to get over some stuff. Like, Eclipse phases like that, like, I always paid stark attention to environmental factors with Eclipse phase, because it actually matters, because, hey, not everybody can breathe on Mars. Nobody can breathe on the moon, unless you're in an underground moon city. Gravity's always a question, like, temperature is a big concern depending on where you are. You can be like, oh yeah, no, if you're just naked outside in the sun at this range with no atmosphere to protect you, it's like 200 degrees and you'll die. Or it's like, oh hey, if you go into like the shadow out of the light, it's like, negative 200 degrees and you'll freeze to death. Like, that's always the fun thing.
Plan accordingly.
Yeah, plan accordingly. That's how I handle a lot of running games. I've realized is plan accordingly. Like, we talked for a long time about Mages of War last time, which we got some positive feedback for.
Oh, we did?
Yeah. But, like, that's, like I said then, I think that's how I approached that game. That game was definitely written to be like, you guys are super powerful if you try, but if you don't know what you're doing, you can still fuck up, right? Like, you are supposed to be highly skilled, potent wielders of magic who are elite soldiers, right? But at the same time, you have to still engineer the setting and the system so that they can still fuck up, because don't roll dice if nothing interesting is going to happen if they fail. Like, don't even make it a question. That's one of the evolution of game design over the past couple decades is a really interesting thing that I have always tried to pay attention to. There are a lot of games from like the early to late 2000s period, or even the early 2010s, that took the concept of like say yes or roll the dice, which just percolated to most games, which is good, I think. Like, if nothing's gonna happen when you roll the dice, don't roll the fucking dice. It's a waste of everybody's time. It involves math and looking at character sheets. It's just a real mood killer sometimes. Just go with the flow unless it matters. And then if you want it to matter, design it to matter in a meaningful way. So like Mages of War is like that to me. Like I was like, there are some easy outs and there are some not easy outs, but it's like, no, listen, like if you're in a northern front and it's fucking cold, you're gonna take penalties for it. And I worked on that. Like I worked on stuff for like what's your breathing right. And honestly, working on the game again has let me catch a couple little things. Like for instance, I tweaked the holding your breath rules. Because the way they were originally written, it was straight up, you had toughness modifier in rounds of holding your breath. But then I was like, wait, that's very short, because a round is like the usual game constraint. It's like 6-ish seconds. So most people can hold their breath for like half a minute. I'm like, that seems short in some contexts. So
Yeah.
I adjusted the rules to like, okay, if you're in structured time, if you're in combat, where presumably you're doing stuff like sprinting, fighting people, etc., that's toughness modifier in rounds because you're exerting a lot of energy. If you are in a extended situation or you're in a situation where you're not losing lots of energy, then it's minutes, because most people who have functional lung capacity can hold their breath for quite a long time if you do nothing.
Yeah.
I practiced that a lot as a kid because we had a pool. We formerly had a pool, so I would do like breathing drills and like practice and stuff, doing laps underwater. You can last quite a while without air, and if you do pretty good, you can last. If you really practice your lung capacity, people who go skin diving, no equipment, just holding their breath, can last a long time.
I think the record's like 6 minutes or something.
Mm-hmm. And then of course you get magic involved, so like there's literally a spell to like double the amount of time you can hold your breath and stuff, or just by diving gear. It's a thing.
Oh my god, I was wrong. The human record is 22 minutes and 22 seconds.
Yeah, I was thinking to myself, like 6 minutes is way too short, but the flow of the conversation, like I was thinking like 30 minutes. I overshot it a little bit still. Yeah, no. By the way, there's a quirk you can purchase in Mages of War called Diver's Lungs, which doubles your natural time to hold your breath anyway, which is probably how you would pull that 22 minutes sort of thing off, is get some bonuses in there. But yeah, so like I thought about a lot of environmental factors and a lot of like rules, and that's how the game is. The game's full of like stuff you can get. Some stuff is just, I'm not quite so obsessed that I came up with like a rule or an extended description for like everything. Like I just figured out a chart of common items that would be available during that time period, which can include some unusual things like propane torches and fire extinguishers. Those existed in the 1910s in some form. But like, so those are just common purchases you can get, but like there's a lot of stuff that has rules and weights and stuff in there, like collapsing ladders, certain kinds of tools. I believe like a block and tackle is in there because it's explicitly like, hey, here's how much carrying a block and tackle weighs, here's what it does, which is it gives you a bonus to like lift or pull things. And you never know when you might need one of those. And if you don't have one, I can be like, okay, do you guys have a rope and pulley system? Well, we're not carrying one. Well, you better roll something to rig one up, or you come up with a different solution to move this heavy shit. I've still been working on it on and off. I've finished, I think, a lot of the advanced player rules. Actually, talking about adjustment as I work on stuff, last week when we talked about it, Lucky, I took some of the stuff you said to heart, actually, because you said that you still felt like the skill list with your starting XP seemed a little constrained, right? There are a lot of options you could take.
Yeah.
And you could still miss on a decent number of stuff. So I took what you said to heart, because you are like one of literally 3 people who have playtested this game for me.
Mm-hmm.
So when I set out specializations to the expanded unit rules, I changed them. So it's straight up, no, if you're using these rules, if you're playing a specialized unit, you just straight up get the skill, you get the extra equipment if there is any, you get the extra ability. And just be like, cool. Yeah, no, it's a unified thing. If you're playing in an armored unit where you're accompanying armored vehicles, everybody gets mechanics. We're just not dealing with you not getting it. Everybody can use a toolkit. And I think I give everybody multi-tools or something, and be like, yeah, no, guess what? You're attached to a vehicle unit, you know how to fucking fix vehicles. You guys might be crewmen who don't know how to, like, drive vehicles, but you know how to fix them and work on them and understand them.
Yeah, that makes sense.
If you're a tunneling unit, because tunnelers were used to make mines in the siege sense, the demolition sense, you get demolitions. This is what your job is. You know how to handle explosives. Maybe not great, but you know it. And some of them were easy. It was like, hey, if you're naval infantry, which is my, the one of the fancy pants ways you can say Marines, you're trained in athletics, you know how to swim. Because mages are valuable. I even put that in when I wrote a fluff section on, like, practical stuff with mages in the military, which covered a lot of other interesting things. Have you had any time to read that, actually? I know you like to read a lot of my fluff.
I have not yet. I haven't looked at it yet.
You should. Well, when you get a chance, you should. It's in Uniformis, because it talks about some interesting stuff with like mage units and practically what they do. That was basically based on the stuff I wrote for mechanics. I mentioned in there
I've just been
explicitly.
super busy. Like I haven't been able to do much of anything.
That's fair. I've not been busy the past couple of days. I've been a little tired. Some people may have noticed that there was a day when there was nothing up on the channel. I'm sorry. I literally had nothing in the tank. It's not like a mental tiredness. It was like I still feel like I want to do stuff, but like you sit down for a second, you stand up, and you're like, oh fuck, I'm exhausted.
Mm-hmm.
Like my sleep schedule got a little weird for a couple days, and I think I'm still getting over it. I'm better today.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping we'll keep going with that. I did start posting our what will be my playthrough of Extella. I recorded the first episode, and actually space-wise, it worked out okay. Like I was watching the space requirements, so I think I will right out of the gate do 45-minute to an hour-long episodes.
Nice. I'm gonna try and finish Dead Space this weekend because it's Labor Day weekend.
Yeah.
Fucking extra day. Like I might actually be able to edit like our let's talk in a timely manner.
Speedy fashion. That'll be cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, so like I haven't been able to
collab
do a whole lot like game-wise and stuff, but I understand that being busy. But the point I was going to make though was that I explicitly wrote in the flavor text, hey, the mages are super important, so guess what? They make sure you know how to swim before you go into the army. Or at the very least, they make sure you know how to not drown.
Yep.
Naval infantry actually get some interesting abilities. They get bonuses to swim. They don't treat shallow water as difficult terrain, and I think they get like +1 extra round of holding their breath just in case. Basically, like, yeah, guess what? You guys are trained to do like ship defense and amphibious assaults and stuff. Most basically mage marines are also sub-mages, so you know some shit about swimming. Because let's not be stupid. That's one of the beautiful things about writing about mages is like, hey, you're a human who has exceptional value on an individual level. Now they can not be done with you.
Yep.
Like, for instance, if you're an aerial corps mage unit, you get parachutes. Now, fun fact about World War I, pilots in planes and bombers did not get parachutes because High Command thought you would abandon a perfectly functional aircraft rather than try to land it. Mm-hmm. And in that time period, the aircraft were definitely more expensive than the pilots, because flight school was like a couple weeks. And they can get another one of you. If you crash your expensive bomber full of bombs, well, that's a lot of money down the drain.
Yeah.
But ballooners doing like recon balloons, because they had valuable intelligence, they would get parachutes. Mages are important, so they get parachutes, and they get trained in pilots, so they can operate parachutes. But it was just like a funny comparison to be like, no, on an individual level, mages are very valuable. They give you guys parachutes. Which is something I do want to impress a little in some of the writing, and I even talked about that like in that new fluff section I wrote. Like, there's a little bit of opportunity for a game master to play up the social divide between mundanes and mages, right? Like, you could play up the fact that, like, mages get the best equipment, they get the best treatment, in general, maybe not in a super specific way, but in general, like, high commands tend to care about the fact that their mages live so they can continue to blow shit up with their minds. Regular soldiers are much less well treated during this war.
Oh my god.
But, and in general, honestly, probably, but especially during World War I, there were a lot of dumb tactics that were continuously used because they were literally had no other ideas.
Mm-hmm.
Like, the war went on for a couple of years before they invented the tank, so there were a couple of years of lots of fucking around in trenches going literally nowhere.
As I said, this is why technology advances, because people are like,
Alright, so we've got one trench full of the Krauts. Actually, no, at this point it would be the Dirty Huns. Because that was something the Kaiser actually said. So we've got over here a trench full of Dirty Huns, and over here we've got a trench full of our boys, and in between there's a fuckload of no man's land with, like, bits of barbed wire and dead trees and villages we flattened in there. And both sides have machine guns, so if we want to go from our trench to their trench, they're just going to shoot us a whole bunch. How do we get around this? And some guy says, let's build a caterpillar-treaded metal box so it can just ignore all that shit. And then they're like, okay, well, we're not going anywhere, so get back to us as soon as you can. And then it's like the SpongeBob, 2 years later. And they're like, gentlemen, we've invented the Mark I land ship.
Strikes too, like, Jesus fucking Christ.
Oh,
like, a
yeah,
lot of times,
no.
like, there'd be like artillery support going on there too. So,
Oh
like, guess
yeah,
what?
no. Like the other thing is, oh, and our trenches don't go anywhere, but we're constantly shooting at each other with mortars and stuff, so we explode. This is another horror story I heard. One of the things that one of the Call of Cthulhu type publishers, Pagan Publishing, who also did the original Delta Green, they've also worked on like World War I specific stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And they even recorded some games for some actual play websites. To me, it's a real trip. It's like that. Like, on some level, those are also responsible for Mages of War. This idea that you could combine fantastical, weird shit with World War I.
Mm-hmm.
It's just I borrowed a lot of the fantastical shit aesthetics from other series.
Yeah.
But you learn a lot of things. The Great War was fucking metal in, like, the best and worst ways. They had things like pistol bayonets. Because.
Yeah.
You know, like we said, flamethrowers were invented, chemical weapons were utilized.
You know that whole look of, like, German soldiers with, like, the fucking gas mask and fucking metal helmets? That's an actual thing.
Nope.
Like,
yeah, gas helmets.
Christ. Yeah.
So were the British also did the same thing, because guess what? Chemical weapons, you need a gas mask, you also need a helmet. We talked about tunnelers before. Those were... the British detonated a fuckload of mines where they literally tunneled under German trenches and filled it full of ammonol or gun cotton or whatever and just set it off to create a gap in the lines. One of these detonations was so loud that even though it was in Belgium, it was audible in London. They could hear the boom all the way across the British Channel.
Wow.
Yeah, no.
Whoa.
Until nuclear weapons were invented, these were like the record setters for biggest explosives. They're big fucking bombs, okay? Like, that's what I say, the war was stupid in some of the ways they solved the problems they created, okay? Like,
Remember back
we've
earlier
invented
when we
this
said
problem
that we
of
said
trench
humans are
warfare. How do we
reckless?
get the fuck around it? Let's just blow them the fuck up by building miles of tunnels underground. But one of the horror stories I heard was that for possibly years, there was a situation, there was a part of the front in Belgium where the German lines were like up on a rise or a hill. This is where this tunneling occurred, because that was the Call of Cthulhu scenario, was you're tunneling and you accidentally hit something spooky. But the German lines were on a slight rise, they were on a raised plateau. The British solution eventually was to turn that hill into a crater, but because of the angle of the shooting, there were possibly years where the British trenches were not deep enough. So if you were just standing up, minding your own business, German snipers could hit you.
Mm-hmm.
They dug them deeper to make it so you could not get hit over the lip with like the angles and stuff. That's just, like I said, that's the real ethos of Mages of War, is like, you can do some crazy shit, but this is the world you're thrust into. It is dumb and scary and ugly. And then sometimes demons come
I think
out.
it might, like, oh man, if I have like a time, I might just make another Mages of War character, because I want to think about this. Like,
Well, hey, anytime you want to. I literally designed this system to be able to be run at the drop of a hat. I built shitloads of random tables.
I'm gonna get a hold of Martha and see if we just want to buddy cop something.
Oh, that also reminds me, I finished the random logistics table. We talked about that before, too. That was a fun one.
Oh, yeah.
You can get shit like golf bags. I threw a couple gags in there, like, you can get a set of 12 traditional maid uniforms. You can also get useful shit, like you can just get a heavy weapon, you can get valuable items, you can get, like, I think one is a crate with, like, 10 cartons of cigarettes, each which holds, like, 10 packs, so you can just be like, I'm covered in fucking cigarettes. If you want to use them, there's a result where you get a pallet full of chemical weapons, like bombs or shells or something. Lots of fun stuff. That's in the GM's Guide doc. But yeah, no, it's full of just dumb logistical fuck-ups. Like, you can get gas masks. Guess what? They're broken. The filters are wrong. They don't actually work as gas masks. And yeah, so that's a lot of fun stuff I threw in there.
Yeah, I'm gonna ask like Marth, like right now, if he just wants to body cop something. I'm gonna suggest either fucking Sky of Hope or Mages of War.
Because, like I said, I literally random tables. I designed a random campaign generation system. Sorry about that. My throat's been a little scratchy lately. I recorded a Legion video
I'm
before
ending
this.
this fucking drought, like, right now. I've been waiting for people, like, been trying, like, oh, you know, if I be patient, they'll show up. No.
Yeah, I've
Lucky
done that
wait's
sometimes.
no longer.
But that also sometimes doesn't work. Sometimes you just gotta Shanghai people.
Yeah.
But like I said, no, I can randomly generate a campaign literally whenever. I don't even have to generate missions. I've got tables for that too.
Yeah.
It's like I said, one of the beauty. I think the only thing I need to do in this pass is finish out the last couple of NPC templates, and then obviously take some suggestions maybe for advanced careers or advanced units. I think I covered most of my bases, and obviously, hopefully you guys will read over some of the new stuff and, you know, double check it for me.
Yeah, depending on what Mars wants to play, but
Mhm.
I said, like, I've just been, like, super busy, like, just with work. Like, I usually have to take 2 of my days to edit. I haven't done any of my, like, I recorded, like, 1 hour of Dead Space in, like, the past week. I haven't even got it, like, edited yet. I'm, like, I literally lost it for a bit. I'm like, where the fuck did I put it? Because I thought I had rendered in stuff. I didn't.
That's okay, though.
Sure,
Honestly, I talked about doing a Legion video earlier. I'm kind of glad that FFG threw that up there. Well, one, because this is 2 hours long and it's 9 o'clock, so God knows when the video version of this episode will be posted. So I'm glad that I was able to, like, write and make and schedule a video in the schedule without having to, like, sit down for a long time and do another Extella, which I don't mind. It's just, like I said, been a little tired lately. But it's always good to have a little bit of backlog, and that's the same I've been. I'm like, that's why I started, like, a Cook Serve Delicious play, although apparently I need to balance my audio better on that, because that's just, like, because also, like, as fun as it is and as cool as it is, there's a lot of setup involved in setting up my capture card, because I gotta, like, plug it into my computer in a USB slot. I gotta, like, make sure HDCP, the built-in copy protection on HDMI, is turned off on my PS4, which means I cannot then use my PS4 to, like, watch YouTube or Amazon or anything, because then you could very easily use that to commit piracy.
Yeah.
So the apps are like, if you don't have the copy protection turned on, fuck you. But if you do have it turned on and you try to start your capture card, it glitches out because it's like, oh shit, it's blocked.
Really?
Yes. If you have it plugged into, like, if you buy, like, a really cheap HDMI splitter that doesn't have the HDCP built in, it ignores it. But, like, you have to remember to, for normal purposes, if you're directly plugged into the capture card, you have to make sure to turn, on the PS4 anyway, you have to make sure to turn HDCP off. So it's like, I have to, like, plug everything in, and then I have to, like, unplug it because the capture card is, like, powered by the USB. So it's like, there's multiple switching around of stuff, and then I have to run the capture software and all that, which is, it's fine. It runs pretty good, actually. Not super intensive. It captures my voice okay. I think our volume levels are alright. I listened back a little, and I realized that what I think of as my dramatic read voice, I don't like anymore, so I don't think I'm going to bother.
Okay.
Because I read some of the exposition in, like, a stern, dramatic tone, and I'm like, God, that doesn't sound good. I'll just read it more casually in future. And I said in the Let's Play, for servant dialogue, not even bothering. Those lines are fucking fully voiced. Listen to the Japanese voice actors be way better than me.
It's like, do not even try to compare it to the Umu.
I am literally just going to read expositional dialogue and some of Hakuno's inner thoughts. Honestly, that's because, though, like, as I remembered from just playing the first like hour or so of Extella, Hakuno's blaseness about a lot of stuff is very funny at some points.
Oh man,
that
like,
would be
I'm
bad.
thinking about playing, like, doing, like, Let's Plays of games I haven't played. Like I just realized that I might, like, cry while recording for some bits. Just, like, on air. I think some people would enjoy that. Just hear me just, like, sob softly into the microphone.
The emotional stuff can definitely be a thing.
Yeah.
Like,
you won't cry, you emotionless husk.
No, I'm just gonna be real fucking sad when some stuff happens in Extella, though.
Yeah.
Ooh boy. I don't usually talk a lot when I'm in emotional distress, so we'll see what that sounds like. Like, I won't be, like, crying with, like, tears or anything, but we'll see what my emotional state sounds like.
Oh man. Anyway, I think it's about time we wrap this up.
Yeah, we've been going about 2 hours, like I said. I think we've run out of steam on a lot of topics. We talked about Cyberpunk a lot, and about about genres of fiction in general, which we springboarded into a lot of the philosophical concepts and stuff like Cyberpunk tackles, which is cool.
Yeah.
We professed our love for lots of tabletop systems.
As usual.
We talk about video games a lot. We didn't talk about anime, but that's okay, because you've been busy, I've been tired. I have not made a lot of headway on the anime front. I think I got, like, one more episode of Engelmon and Banana Fish in before I was like, fuck, I'm so tired.
Like, to talk about anime, like, I can keep up on my Crunchyroll anime, because that's on my PS4, and, you know, multitasking. I have not watched any of, like, anything that's, like, not on Crunchyroll, which is, like, Banana Fish and, like Happy Sugar Life, like Jaeger. It's like, oh man, it's like the stuff I need to catch up on, and that's that. I'm hoping I to use this 3-day weekend.
It's always good. Oh fuck, I need to plug my phone in because it was unplugged for a while because I was beating some raids. But
oh no, dude, man, I totally beat Dear Mud like during this time.
Well, I beat
Dear Mud
during the first like 10 or so minutes of the episode. I beat Blackbeard, so. The other reason why I stopped was because I didn't want to fuck around with, like, figuring out missions to unlock stuff while I was also doing the show. But, yeah, look forward to that.
Actually, my main complaint, like, right now this show is, like, Omega, you talk a lot. It's kind of hard for me to segue into other conversations.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Like,
I definitely felt like that this episode. That was, like, which is really interesting
because there's more things I want
to...
Like, cause there's more things I wanted to say on particular topics and whatnot, but you just keep talking, and by the time you stopped, we were in a completely different topic. I'm like, I don't want to try and drag this back. Like, I try to do that occasionally, but it's like, I don't want to be doing that every single fucking time, because then I feel like we won't actually make a lot of progress.
Yeah, maybe not every time, because
So
there are points even when I think, either through my own or just through our back and forth, we end up on points where I can't circle back, because that still happens to me anyway. We get off on other points and I can't circle around. Maybe not all the time, but definitely sometimes feel free to, like, roll it back and start over again. Because there are times, I think, when we get off on a point, like, you say a little something, or I say a little something, and the other person goes off for, like, 5 minutes, and then we're like, where the fuck were we?
Yeah.
So if you remember where the fuck we were, feel free to circle me back. I've said this before, I'm talking.
Yeah, because like I said before, it's like, I don't like to interrupt people when they're, like, talking. So, if you hear me talking over Omega, 9 times out of 10 is because he's cut out for me, and I can't hear him talking.
Yeah, that's when we don't realize we're talking over each other, and after a certain point, it's like, it's too late to stop. I'm already in the middle of my fucking sentence.
Yeah.
So we apologize for that. The audio quality thing is something we're constantly tuning on. I think the first couple... There were definitely been some What's Up episodes in the past where you took a lot of momentum. In the past couple, I've definitely come with topics, which is probably why I started such a powerhouse with them.
That's like, because you mentioned the anime. I've been like really wanting to talk about an anime I've been watching called The Planet With. I mentioned it last week.
Oh yeah.
And I wanted to examine the ideas of justice and how good and evil are relative to, you know, where you stand. And we always like kind of touch upon that. Just because, I said, we always get into philosophical discussions about good and evil morality and all that good stuff. But again, like, it's already been 2 fucking hours. I want to watch me some anime, play some games.
I definitely feel like part of that's definitely my fault this episode, because it was one topic, but I came in, like, I've been gearing up for the past couple days for, like, yeah, we're fucking going to What's Up. We're going to talk about Cyberpunk this week. What I do is I have note cards, because I needed to keep notes for, like, time codes when I edit videos and stuff. Lucky, I would recommend you make sure to, like, make a sticky note or a note card of Planet With and just stick it up there, and whatever the fuck we do next week, start with that if you want to.
Alright.
If we start at a point... Because honestly, that's something that's hard with this show, right? Because it's very stream of consciousness. Like, picking points to start and stop is hard sometimes.
I honestly, like... I wouldn't mind making this, like, honestly, I could do this, like, for, like, hours upon hours. But it's just the fact of... one, we're, like, recording through Discord, which just means we have connection arrows. We're not in the same time zone. So, it's, like, time, because, like, believe it or not, people, like, and our work schedule, my work schedule is like I work graveyard. So basically, the time we're recording this, I should have been in bed like 3 or 4 hours ago. So I'm like already dead.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of hard for me.
The converse, though,
there's a
is
third
if we
one.
did this when you would, like, go to bed and wake up normally, then it's, like, late at night for me, so...
Yeah, so
I
it's
want to
like,
die.
I usually bite the so I usually just bite the bullet for that, but still, it's like I'm not as sharp as I could be. But like, what I really want to do is I want to do how I can't pronounce, like, Funhouse does it,
Funhouse.
where they're literally doing stream of consciousness while a guy plays a video game.
Oh, yeah, like, for
I
their
could do that,
show
like,
Dude Soup, where they, like, they put
Dude
stuff in the
Soup,
background.
Yeah, like I would love to do that, but as I said, again, contingent on Omega getting here so we can sync up and become more than the sum of our parts.
Yeah, we'll form Voltron, which is another thing I should do. I should talk about Voltron, but I haven't watched the new season because I'm so tired.
I gotta watch Voltron. Like, I've watched 3 or 4 episodes, and I've just kind of floated off on it.
But if
so many things
you
I
were
need to
Voltron
watch.
trash like me, I feel ya. I haven't caught up with the latest season yet, though, because so busy, so tired.
Story of Justice. Gotta put Justice in all caps. From several angles.
But yeah, all right.
Not angels, god damn it. Angles. I typed angels again.
Oh my god. Rouge Angles of Satin.
Oh man.
Other classic
Omega, why don't
wordplays.
you do the outro?
Yeah, no. We've been doing this 2 hours. We're gonna wrap up. I've been a little like heartburny lately, and I don't know why. So I'm gonna get some ice cream for my throat and stuff. If you like this video, give it a like. If you have any comments about any of the bullshit we've talked about, or just about audio balance or like topic balance at all, leave them in the comment section down below. You can also get a hold of us on our Discord. That link is in the description. And of course, if you are new here and have not already, because this title is going to be slightly clickbaity, go ahead and subscribe, and don't give that bell to notifications. Also, as it says at the front of the episode, you can support us on Patreon. You can get access to episodes early. You can get this episode in an audio format, downloadable right away as soon as it's done. And just, yeah, in general, enjoy life. We're going to go join the Cyberpunk future now. Because, hey, Lucky, in case you didn't realize, we're living a very futuristic life right now with our fucking internet radio show.
Yeah, no.
Future!